Forget everything you know about the Elder Scrolls V and prepare yourself for your most challenging adventure yet in the chilling lands of Skyrim. Requiem is the quintessential role-playing overhaul mod. It aims to add realism at every corner to make the world feel believable and as harsh as it should be. By doing so, this has created an environment that is not for the faint of heart. Should you embark on this journey of Requiem, you must learn what is in store or perish to an early demise. Requiem changes almost every aspect of the game. There are many versions of Requiem and even specific add-ons that will completely change your experience. In this video, we will be talking about Requiem version 4.0 and up without any add-ons or changes to the overhaul. With that said, the gameplay I am showing you is from the mod list Serenity 2 version 1.6 from Wabbajack, so some of the items and effects you may see will be different than plain vanilla Requiem. One key change that you will find in most curated lists featuring Requiem is some form of enemy attack movement modification. Mortal Enemies is a well-known mod that reduces the amount of turn radius you and your enemies can do while attacking, essentially locking you into the direction you started your attack. This is somewhat of a controversial topic in the Requiem community, as it allows the player to abuse enemy AI and dodge attacks with relative ease. Should you play with any of these Requiem-based add-ons, be sure to read the mod page to learn what changes it makes to vanilla Requiem. The single most impactful change Requiem has made to Skyrim was de-leveling the world to make it more realistic. Enemies no longer scale to your level. A pack of wolves at level 1 will be very challenging, whereas that same pack won't stand a chance when you are level 10. On the other hand, dragons will not be an attainable enemy for quite some time, as they are some of the most formidable foes in Skyrim. This creates a sort of enemy progression system that makes certain parts of the land very treacherous and others more welcoming to low-level characters. Now, should you start your adventure as a prisoner bound for the chopping block,
Hey, you're finally awake.
or a hunter camping in the woods, your first decision to be made can influence the rest of your journey. There are 10 races to pick from, and each race differs in starting skill level, regeneration rates, and have unique abilities and resistances. I will give a general breakdown of each race and their abilities, but should you want to read up on all of the detailed information for each race, I will include links to Reddit posts in the description that will provide that kind of detailed information. Keep in mind, while you can pick any race for any build, some races will perform better than others in certain skills. Not every character build can clear all of the content Requiem has to offer, but this will all be a part of your character's roleplay. The best defensive races to pick from would be the Nord, Dwemer, and Breton. You cannot go wrong as a newcomer picking any one of the big three. Nords have a 50% resistance to frost and a 25% resistance to shock. Dwemer have a 50% resistance to fire. Bretons have a 20% resistance to magic. The most offensive races would be the Orsimer, Bosmer, and Khajiit. These races become much better as you improve as a player because you will better be able to take advantage of their aggressive abilities. Orsimer are the poster child of offense and aggression. Their once per day racial power doubles their physical damage dealt and halves their physical damage taken for 30 seconds. It also restores 700 points of stamina per second for 30 seconds. This is definitely one of the best powers in the game and makes Orsimer the go-to race for anyone wanting to dish out the most damage possible. I consider Bosmer to be an aggressive race because of their racial ability to collect strange meat from humanoids that they kill, which is a unique food item only to them that gives them a great buff. Strange meat allows Bosmer to restore 2 stamina and 2 magicka per second for 300 seconds. This also increases their weapon damage and blocking effectiveness by 20% for 300 seconds. Khajiit could be considered a neutral race, but the reason I put them in the offensive category is due to their natural gift of movement speed. Khajiit have a 15% boost to movement speed, which is a type of trait that cannot be achieved from other sources of magical effects. Movement speed is a very powerful tool for combat, as it allows you to weave in and out of enemies' attacks and even dodge arrows and spells, giving you the ability to be more aggressive in combat. The neutral races are the Imperials, Argonian, and Redguard. These races are well-balanced choices. Imperials have the best stamina management in the game, which is a very important component of Requiem, which would make them a very desirable race for a beginner. Argonians could be considered a defensive race due to their racial power, allowing them to restore 10 health per second for 60 seconds, and restore 1 health per second for 1 in-game hour. The reason I don't consider them to be one of the defensive races is because the big three all have a type of elemental or magical resistance, which is far more valuable in terms of defense. Also, the health regeneration power becomes less impactful at later levels, although it is still quite good. Redguards are very middle of the pack. They have a 75% resistance to disease and poison, and have a very strong racial power that restores 10 stamina per second, slows time by 50%, and grants paralysis immunity, all for 30 seconds. And then there was one. The last race is the Altmer. Altmer make exceptional mages with their 50 points of additional magicka and a racial power that restores 100 magicka per second for 30 seconds. The classification for Altmer would be Glass Cannon, because their one downside is they have a detrimental 40% weakness to magic. Now there are ways to counteract this and make it not as bad, but with any race you play as, you will always want to increase your magic resistance as much as you can. Starting with a 40% weakness makes it very difficult to have any type of real defense against magic, and since most powerful enemies in the game are of the magical sort, this does make the race much harder to play in the later game. Once you have selected your race, your next important decision starts right away. Requiem starts you off with 3 perks, and these 3 perks can often be the most important perks you spend. Perks are very important, so much so that most skills are unusable without them, such as Alchemy and Lockpicking. While some skills don't require a perk to be used, like speech and combat skills, they are very weak in comparison to when you have spent a point in their respective tree. Some races even have the ability to use certain skills without taking the first perk. If you want to be able to fight enemies at level 1, the best thing you can do is put a point in your relevant combat skill trees. Then there is Alchemy. Alchemy is one of the most powerful skill trees in the game. Alchemy gives you a steady way to increase your character's level, all while selling your concoctions for great profits, which eventually nets you the ability to create even more powerful potions to aid you in your journey. Most Requiem players know how exploitable Alchemy really is, and a lot of people outright refuse to use it or use other mods to nerf the effectiveness. No one should tell you how to play Requiem. This video's purpose is to educate you so that you may choose your own path. However, Alchemy will definitely make this path easier for you. Heavy Armor is a skill tree that doesn't technically require a perk to be used, but without the first perk, any heavy armor equipped will continuously drain your stamina. Heavy armor also drastically lowers your movement speed to the point where most players won't even wear a full set until they're level 25 heavy armor and have the first 3 perks. If you decide to use light armor, the skill tree has been renamed to Evasion, and as the name implies, you really don't want to be taking too many hits when wearing light armor. Archers are the bane of your existence in Requiem, and light armor doesn't provide much protection from bolts and arrows. Heavy armor does a great job at absorbing this damage, but most players who choose Evasion use an apprentice illusion spell called Blur that drastically reduces the damage taken from bolts and arrows. Armor chest pieces also have unique traits that you can find in your active effects tab while wearing the armor. These traits are additional resistances that the armor provides you. Some of these are called Range 1 or /3. It is fairly straightforward that /3 offers you extra resistance to weapons that slash, like swords. The number indicates the strength of the trait. These traits make certain chest pieces better than others even if their overall armor rating is lower. They might provide a better resistance trait for the content you are trying to tackle. One of the best early light armor chest pieces is the Stormcloak Cuirass because it has range 2, which is a great thing to have early in the game. Requiem also has a mass system that's determined by the weight of the gear you are wearing. Certain enemies like Sabre cats can knock you down when attacking, but having a higher mass can counteract this mechanic. Also, when you charge into combat while sprinting, you can run into enemies causing a bull rush, where you can disrupt them or even completely knock them down depending on your mass. Now you've selected your perks and it's off to the races. Except you just ran out of stamina and it keeps draining every time you try to run. As for the gameplay in Requiem, one of the most crucial changes to how you play the game is stamina management. Stamina dictates important mechanics such as attack speed, movement speed, and even how much your spells cost. You should treat your stamina bar as your second health bar, because if it runs out, you're probably dead. While stamina regenerates slow, health does not regenerate on its own, so if you are low on stamina and start taking hits, you could be felled very quickly. There are a handful of actions that will drain your stamina. These are running, sprinting, jumping, holding block, drawing a bow, and even swinging your weapon. The best way to counter this is to have long-term food buffs. While Requiem by itself doesn't require you to eat to survive, it's very important to have some kind of buff that gives you a certain amount of stamina per second over a period of time. Soups and stews have some of these long-term effects. Some of them don't offer stamina regeneration, but instead offer health buffs like beef stew, or magicka buffs like elsewhere fondue. The best food item for stamina regeneration is bestial stew, as it gives you the most stamina back per second, although only races with the strong stomach passive can consume this grotesque meal. The races with this passive are Orsimer, Argonian, Khajiit, and Bosmer. Before you adventure out into the land, it is imperative that you have some kind of stamina regenerating food buff, otherwise, you're not gonna have a good time. Another key component to shaping your character is your birth sign choice. In Requiem, when you select a birth sign, or standing stone, you will be locked into that group of standing stones. Should you pick the warrior stone, you will not be able to select another standing stone outside of the warrior's group, such as the apprentice stone or the tower stone. I will not be going over the standing stone's powers in this video, as there will be a link in the description that will outline this information in more detail. Another reason I am not covering this portion is because this is a common feature that gets overhauled by other Requiem related mods, so if you are playing a Wabbajack mod list that features Requiem, chances are the standing stone abilities will be completely different. Adric blessings fall into the same category as the standing stones. This is another feature that is commonly overhauled by other mods and is easier to read about than to go over in a video like this. I will say though, in vanilla Requiem, the divines do not play around, and you can easily lose their favor for good. Our stomach is full, our birth sign determined, our divine has been worshipped, and our sword is itching for battle. It is time to jump into combat. On your first travel to Riverwood from Helgen, chances are you ran into 3 wolves, and these wolves might have gotten the best of you. Requiem does not follow suit with vanilla Skyrim combat. You are no longer a face-tanking god of a character that can swing your weapon relentlessly until your foes are defeated. You should properly time your swings and avoid being hit by your enemy, all while managing your stamina to ensure you don't exhaust yourself. Since the world of Requiem is de-leveled, there are plenty of enemies that will be out of reach at the beginning of the game. On the other hand, there are countless enemies for your character to hone their combat skills on. I will be going over many different enemy types and a rough outline of the order of difficulty that they come in. Keep in mind that the character build you play may have an easier time against certain enemy types, as most enemies have their own sets of resistances and weaknesses. The advice that I will give for most enemy types will be from the perspective of a physical combat character build, as marksmen and mages can play from a safe distance in most situations. For brand new players to Requiem, Mudcrabs are typically the starting enemy that is recommended to practice your skills on. The things to look out for when fighting large Mudcrabs is their jump attack that can knock you down and do decent damage. Also, large Mudcrabs have a deceptively long range, so be wary. A wolf by itself is no challenge, but most wolves travel in packs. The more they outnumber you, the less your odds of escaping the fight alive. Wolves can be bashed when doing their jump attack, which is a great method to fighting them without taking damage. For a more experienced player, bandits are enemies you take on at level 1. For the newer players, it is probably a good idea to stay practicing on smaller game until you gain a few levels and confidence in your combat prowess. The most annoyingly difficult bandits you will be fighting are ranged combatants. Ranged weaponry hits hard in Requiem, and if you're not equipped with good heavy armor or use the illusion spell Blur, you will be taking some serious damage early on. Some ways to combat ranged bandits is to learn how to dodge arrows, bull rush them, or even break their ranged weapon. In Requiem, lower tier bows and crossbows will break if they are equipped when getting hit by a physical attack. This also goes for your character, so be careful. Bandits wielding two-handed weapons are to be feared in close quarters combat. The best way to fight them is to bait their power attacks and punish, but always be alert to their next attack. Bandits with shields can often get annoying to fight as they will constantly block your physical attacks. To get around this, you need to stay at your weapon's max range so when you swing, they can't bash you. Alternatively, you can bait their attack and counterattack. One major thing to be weary of is high-level bandits with shields, like Ron the Crow. They can power bash you and send you flying if you aren't spacing yourself properly. The scariest bandits of all are the ones that wield scrolls and staves. Sometimes a bandit will have a scroll of fireball that will kill you in one shot outright. Wards from the restoration tree are a perfectly valid form of defense against this type of attack. Otherwise, you will need to take these enemies out from range or dodge their spells and close the distance to strike swiftly. The Plains of Whiterun will instill a fear in every Requiem player at some point. Sabre cats are no joke. They will sneak up on you out of nowhere and pounce. You will be dead before you know what hit you. Sabre cats are a deadly enemy that can knock you down repeatedly with their pounce attack. Due to this mechanic, even the strongest of characters can die to a surprise saber cat attack. Always be on the lookout when traveling the wilderness. I usually play in third person to get a wider view of the area so I can spot them before they spot me. If you learn the timing, you can bash a saber cat like you can a wolf to negate their attack. Although this is risky, it is still a good way to deal with them if you are underleveled. Typically, you will want to deal with them at range or be able to do enough damage in a short burst so they don't have the chance to send you flying. Another thing to note about enemies that cause knockdowns is the way Skyrim handles fall damage. Sometimes, if you are knocked down a slight slope in the game, it will determine that you have fallen a much higher distance, and this will lead to your demise. I put bears in a similar category as saber cats. Although they usually won't sneak up on you and pounce, they still hit just as hard and have a knockdown mechanic, but fighting them is very much the same. Another creature I would put in this tier would be trolls. Trolls are well known for their ability to quickly regenerate, but this is stunted with any source of fire damage, even bashing with a torch. You will find out quickly that you do not deal enough damage when fighting a troll. The Forsworn are generally a more difficult version of bandits. A lot of them are marksmen or use scrolls and staves, the two types of bandits that are the hardest to deal with. We will now be tackling the Falmer and Frostbite spiders. Smaller spiders are manageable at lower levels, but when you run into a giant Frostbite spider, you will understand true fear. Giant Frostbite spiders will lunge at you to knock you down and can poison you with their fangs, causing paralysis and damage over time. You will also have to look out for their poison spit. When it comes to poisons in Requiem, the Falmer have a trademark on it. These vile creatures specialize in potent poisons they dip their arrows in and barrage at you. Falmer are basically the next tier of humanoid creatures, just as Forsworns were to bandits. Falmer can wield one-handed weapons and shields, of which they can power bash with, and some are even mages casting frost spells and using staves to summon Atronachs. When you are fighting enemies with advantages like these is when you really need to start focusing on your character's resistances. Going into a Falmer den with no poison resist or a plan to get around it will definitely get you killed. A lot of Draugr early in dungeons are low level and basically more resilient bandits, but as you delve deeper you will find ones that cast frost spells or even use the power of the Thuum. Frost magic is some of the scariest magic to come across, because if you are hit with a frost spell, it will drain your stamina, slow you down, and make it almost impossible to escape. When encountering frost casting Draugr, the best thing to do is to keep your distance until you can lure them through a doorway where you can have the cover and burst damage them quickly before they can cast their spell. The Draugr that use shouts are the Death Lords. One of the best way to combat a Death Lord is to learn the timing of their shout cooldown, and when they shout, be sure to have cover so that it will absorb the shout for you. Another way to get around being sent to space by a Fusro Da is to get your magic resistance above 50%. This will prevent you from being sent flying by shouts. Draugr and other undead also have a strong resistance to blunt weapons and ranged weaponry. Just like in vanilla Skyrim, giants will truly send you to space if you anger them. As you can imagine, giants can hit very hard and have a plethora of ways to knock you down. If you are skilled at bashing enemies to cancel their attacks, then giants aren't too difficult, but one misstep ends up being your life. The safe way to fell a giant is from range or being able to dish out huge amounts of damage in a single attack so they can't counterstrike. Mammoths are a bit harder than giants, but fall under the same strategy of combat. The automatons in the underground Dwemer ruins are a fierce enemy. They are packed with high armor ratings and have some fairly strong elemental attacks, such as the Centurion Steam attack. Requiem introduces a new type of automaton for you to fight. The Enchanted Sphere is a buffed up version of the regular sphere that has more health and extremely strong health regeneration, and are also much larger in size. Some type of shock damage is usually a must in order to stunt the health regeneration. These enchanted spheres are hand placed in areas to act as gatekeepers for late game gear or later game quests. The all-powerful Mage, one of the most feared enemy types in Requiem. Until you have good elemental and magic resistance, you might as well not even try. A lot of spells can be dodged, but lightning spells are extremely fast, and some spells have large area of effect hitboxes that make it very difficult to avoid. This is surely an enemy type meant for later game content. Vampires are truly a terrifying enemy in Requiem, as they should be. Vampires have very high health and stamina and are very resilient. You will want to have some kind of silver weapon or fire enchanted weapon to aid you in fighting these beasts. Sun spells from Restoration also work very well against vampires. There are also ebony vampires, which are the highest level vampires you will find outside of named ones. These vampires have very high armor ratings and will have very strong enchanted gear that will bolster their resistances to cover their glaring weaknesses. The main theme of Skyrim is fighting dragons. While in vanilla you can do this fairly early on, you will not want to do so in Requiem. You will need to prepare for your dragon fights. You will need to ensure your resistances to the elements and magic are in order, prepare ways to heal yourself, and ways to deal damage to the dragon from a safe distance. Poisons are a really good tactic to use against dragons, especially the ones you find from the Falmer. Should you fight a dragon in melee range, you must learn to dodge their bites, look out for their wing slaps, and avoid the tail slams at all costs. Dragons have high armor ratings with their scales protecting them, and will also resist the elements they hone themselves. The strongest enemy type in Requiem can be debated, but the Dragon Priests are definitely a part of this debate. The Dragon Priests are truly forces to be reckoned with. They use mage armor to increase their armor rating quite high and have many magical and elemental defenses on top of having the strongest health regeneration in the game. Dragon Priests are often called DPS checks, which is the game's way of seeing if your character is strong enough to deal enough damage over a short period of time without dying. Fire, silver, and sun spells are the most effective against these foul demons. There are many facets of the mod that I will not cover in this video, such as shouts or new spells, as this guide was designed for the brand new player to Requiem that's having a hard time killing a bandit. I also don't want to spoil everything there is in the overhaul. Some things you will have to slightly find out on your own. I have some general survival tips that I would like to add. Some of these will be reiterations of previous points we've already discussed. Always be mindful of your stamina. You really need to start being cautious when it falls below half. Be sure to have some kind of buff from food that gives you some amount of stamina per second over a period of time, and keep in mind that you can't get the buff if you eat while in combat, so prepare before your fight. Even if you plan on using heavy armor or robes, I highly recommend wearing the Stormcloak cuirass early on due to its armor trait of range 2, which gives you decent resistance to arrows. As mundane as it may be, Riverwood and Whiterun is a fantastic starting location. There are tons of Mudcrabs, wolves, and low to medium level bandits that are great for early levels. This also puts you in the area to grab one of the Guardian Stones. Always be cautious when traveling Whiterun Plains. Watch out for Sabre cats. Use your surroundings to your advantage. Constantly I use the terrain around me to kite enemies or even get myself to a safe spot so I can regen my stamina or take a healing potion. I truly believe Requiem is the greatest mod ever created for the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, and it will continue to be the only way that I can enjoy this now 10-year-old beauty of a game. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video has brought you some useful tips to guide you in your journey. I would greatly appreciate if you could give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment below on what you thought about the video. If you enjoy Requiem content, I stream here on YouTube as well as record full One Life Dead is Dead playthroughs, so if this is something you're interested in, please consider subscribing to my channel. A special thanks to Ogre Boss and his team for creating such an amazing experience, as well as a thanks to all the mod and mod list creators that continue to provide support and additions to Requiem. Keep an eye on the skies, traveler.